Welcome back to America's Voice Live. I'm Terrance Bates. Thanks so much for being here with us. President Biden's gun control speech at the National Safer Community Summit in Connecticut has people talking because the president said, "God save the Queen, man." But that wasn't his only incoherent claim. During the speech, Mr. Biden also had this to say.
Made it harder for people to buy stabilized braces. Put a pistol on a brace, it turns into a gun. Makes it more, you can have a higher caliber weapon, a higher caliber bullet coming out of that gun.
So a stabilizing brace doesn't turn a pistol into a gun. A pistol is already a gun. What's more, though, stabilizing braces have only been used in 2 mass shootings. There's no evidence that the braces even made any difference in those attacks. Dr. John Lott, the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, joins me now to talk about stabilizing braces and much more. And before we get to that, Dr. Lott, I want to talk a bit about the charges, the gun charges specifically against first son Hunter Biden. Your thoughts when you heard that this plea deal, this pretrial diversion was offered him for those charges?
I was pretty shocked. I've served as chief economist for the United States Sentencing Commission in Washington that oversees all the criminal penalties for federal crimes. I also have worked more recently in the Department of Justice, where I was involved in looking at the NICS background check system, which is precisely what's being involved here. And there really should have been like 4 felony charges against Hunter Biden for different types of gun actions. Lying on the form to go and buy a gun to begin with, using illegal drugs while he was possessing it, illegal disposure of the gun, and then, school violation, and you could even add in obstruction with regard to the use of Secret Service officers to try to go and get back the original 4473 form from the gun dealer where he had illegally purchased it. So there's a wide range of issues that are there, both involving crimes for Hunter and also even for the Secret Service. But and of course, then on top of that, you have the charges for income tax evasion. But look, just one minor thing here. Anytime you have somebody who's involved in other criminal cases, such as the possible bribery charges with regard to his dad, you use this as leverage in those negotiations to try to get additional information. There's no attempt that was made on that. They didn't bring in his laptop or other things. Look, the evidence in this case about him using illegal drugs is not only his own biography and his dad's statement, but they have a ton of information on the laptop that would have shown that. None of that was brought in. He should have been facing many felony charges. Instead, he's facing no real penalties for any of the gun crimes that were involved.
And it's your contention that this would have been an easy case to make for any sort of prosecutor. But basically, we're seeing now that he's technically not really even going to be charged with the felony because of this pretrial diversion.
Right. Look, these cases are handled within weeks, maybe a month. I mean, you have a form. He signed the form. He lied on the form. We know that he's the one who signed the form. These are very easy cases. They're handled like within a month. This is almost 5 years. They were nearing the statute of limitations for being able to go and deal with this. I can give you case after case after case where people in much different circumstances, much less severe problems than Hunter Biden had, facing many years in prison as a result. I'll give you one case that I saw briefly when I was at the Department of Justice. A 63-year-old man, his wife was getting death threats. She went to get a concealed carry permit. As a present, he went to a gun store to try to buy her a handgun. 40 years earlier, he had gotten into a fist fight in his front yard with his brother. Neighbors had called the police. They had been arrested. They had pleaded to a misdemeanor domestic violence charge. That's a covered offense. He says he didn't realize that something that had happened 40 years ago was going to get him in trouble. He had had no other run-ins with the law in the intermediate 40 years. And the prosecution said it's clearly a covered offense. You signed the form, and he was sent to jail for 3 years.
Wow.
And I mean, I can give you case after case. Just had another case in Virginia where a woman using marijuana. I mean, it's legal to use marijuana in many places in the country here. It's still against federal government rules to do it. She was going to be convicted on 2 charges: 1, improperly filling out the form, and 2, illegal possession of the gun. He has heroin and cocaine and everything else that he's using at the same time. You know, there's no states that legalize those types of drugs at all. You know, it's just really a 2 standards of justice here.
And I think that's the ultimate point that we're trying to drill down on here, is that the kind of leverage, if you will, or the kind of, you know, that the Justice Department in this particular case really gave him a slap on the wrist compared to what any average American would have gotten in a similar circumstance.
Oh, exactly.
All right, so I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about what we were talking about in the intro, the whole idea of stabilizing braces. Explain to us exactly what they are and if people should be concerned about them. President Biden, as you heard earlier, made a statement about them that a lot of people don't agree with.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad you asked that question, because that seems to be completely left out of the debate, what these were designed for originally. They were designed and approved under the Obama administration because you have disabled veterans, people who in combat may have lost part of their hand, or people who may be suffering some paralysis in their hand or their arm that makes them difficult for them to hold on to a gun when you have recoil from the gun. And so the stabilizing brace is essentially a strap that fits to the gun and around the person's arm, so it makes it easier for them to deal with the recoil that's there. There are millions of disabled individuals who are able to go and use guns because of those stabilizing braces. And there's no cost benefit here. There's no discussion. They don't go, as you mentioned, they can point to 2 mass public shootings where the person just happened to use the stabilizing brace. No evidence that it made any difference in those attacks. And yet they want to pass a rule that's going to disarm possibly millions of law-abiding Americans who are disabled. And disabled people are often victims of violent crime because they're relatively easy targets. So there's no discussion of the trade-offs that are there. There doesn't seem to be any benefit from having this, and there's obvious costs from having it. But you would listen in vain. I mean, today, when the Senate was voting on this, you had Senators Durbin and Chuck Schumer talking about stabilizing braces turning handguns into machine guns. I mean, this is silly. It's just a strap. It doesn't change a semi-automatic gun into a fully automatic gun just by adding a strap to the outside of the gun that's there. And, you know, you kind of wonder, do these guys, whether it's President Biden, you know, with his ludicrous statements there, changing the caliber of a gun? How does adding a strap change the caliber of a gun?
Dr. Lott, I'm sorry. I noticed something earlier, and I do kind of want to get to this point before I let you go. You used the word mass shooting, and I think you were very deliberate in that. And people oftentimes have conflated mass shooting with mass killing. Explain your concerns about those specific terminologies and the fact that people are trying to blend the two.
Right, thanks. Well, there are multiple definitions that are out there. There's mass public shootings, okay, and that's 4 or more people killed in a public place, not involving some other type of crime like a robbery or a gang fight over drug turf. It's specifically to try to get at those types of mass public shootings that get attention. Somebody going into a mall or a school or movie theater with the sole desire to go and kill people. That's what gets news attention. Mass shootings are 4 or more people killed in any type of shooting. And then you have this gun violence archive, which the media uses all the time. When they talk about 1 mass shooting a day, they have their own definition. It's a gun control group. It's 3 or more people wounded and or killed, where about 90% of those cases are basically drug gangs fighting against each other. And so you'll have somebody like the president go and mention a couple or a few of the recent mass public shootings, and then go and reference the gun violence policy archive for their number of mass shootings. And conflating the two. I mean, are drug gangs fighting against each other, drug turf bad? Yeah, they are. But there's a reason why the news media doesn't cover most of those things, because they don't have the same kind of emotional shock as somebody going into a place purposely to kill kids or doing something else just to go and kill people. And so, you know, you have all these different terms, and the media does, and I'm glad you asked this question also, because the media does a very poor job of kind of differentiating these things.
Well, the reality is that this unfortunately seems to be a trend. And so one of the ways that we hopefully can stop this trend is by having a good conversation about it, being honest about it, and being more informed. Always good to talk to you, sir. We appreciate your time. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but we'll continue this conversation soon.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you being there.
All right. Talk to you soon. Coming up after the break, the Hunter Biden plot continues to thicken as another whistleblower has verified that the FBI appeared to deliberately conceal information related to Hunter's laptop even back before the 2020 presidential election. We'll have that part of the story and more after the break.